And as the 7-year itch sets in and Mrs. Butthead is dissatisfied and unhappy in her marriage, she decides to cut ties and jump ship for greener pastures in her search for love and happiness. She can find a penis anytime she wants because she's a smut bucket. Ah. But a girl like that needs to get out the house. She is, after all, renting a closet, needs something to do, pardon the pun, needs to get fed, needs to get fucked. But her back's kind of against the wall, again, pardon the pun. She doesn't really have much time for formal introductions and getting to know a motherfucker. So, Mrs. Assface, in all of her infinite wisdom, mostly dim, as in a dimly lit light bulb, decides to dip back into her bucket of lost and found, used and refused, maggots, faggots, worms, weasels, slugs, pussies, cowards, bitch ass motherfuckers, and tech people. Which is, basically kind of the bottom rung of humanity, right? Not necessarily society. Society, they function fine in society because everybody just gets up and doesn't make waves. But as far as humanity goes, they are the lowest of the low. Now, Mrs. Asshat is very familiar with that realm. She hails from there. She spends most of her time there. That's where she does her bidding. But even Mrs. Assface cannot bring herself to fill her time, again, pardon the pun, with this little bitch right here. Because as I said, I have never heard anybody speak so unenthusiastically about someone she was currently dating. That being said, she also doesn't really want to go back to this dude here, even though he has a fancy car. And look at those sunglasses, would you? Ushering in a new style. What are those? Posercles? Not Oakleys. Posercles. You can laugh later. But so she decides to settle for this little gremlin right here. Might not have a fancy car, but he does get her out the house. Gets her fed. Hope she likes Lucky Charms. Gets her fucked. And, if there's one thing he's safe and predictable. I mean, he's had the same job his entire adult life. And she'll just sort of patiently wait it out until she meets Mr. Right, Mr. Sweet Serendipity to stroll into her life and say, hey, little girl, what's a girl like you doing in a place like this? And true to Mrs. Buttface's style, she ends up marrying this guy. Now that she's met true love, here comes marriage, here comes Mrs. Buttface pushing a baby carriage. Mrs. Buttface doesn't half-ass anything. In fact, she, quadruples it, if you know what I'm saying. Last time I saw her, she was about at an ass and a half. Although that was either side, so that's double. She's probably up to 3 now. But anyway, New Beginnings is not only a good name for a feminine hygiene product, it's also a good place to start. So even though she has 2 kids with Mr. Wrong, now she's with Mr. Right. So let's expand that family. Pops out a daughter, and lo and behold, it looks just like Mrs. Buttface. Well, not exactly like her. She's way prettier than Mrs. Buttface. Thank God. Now, I will say, she looks happy and content, so whatever their parenting style is, it seems to be working, maybe. And after a year or two, Mrs. Butthead, she decides, she wants to poop out or pop out another kid. And lo and behold, she has a son. And there you have it. The freak show, that is the Butthead family. Happily ever after, living the American dream. Everybody wants it. Not everybody gets it. But Mrs. Butthead She's gonna fucking get hers. She will do whatever it takes. Literally.
Leprechaun, 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 leprechaun.